Hi, sweeties. How are you doing? Welcome to Naya. Same as Naya, and thank you all so much for all the love and support. Hope you all are doing great. So I love the fact that this topic actually came up because sometimes some people ask some questions and all that. You know how the rate of police brutality is so high, especially when it comes to Black community and all that. And also, why is it that when Black people are seen carrying pew when the other people are also carrying pew, they've really become very violent with Black people and feel threatened most times and all that. And then this was actually, talking about how patrollers, how they go around catching slaves, and also the ones that run away, they go around catch them for the rich palm colored people and look for a way to punish them, and after punishing them they probably turn them into the cops and all that. And then you all remember during slavery how like they were all freed, and you know how people started starting their the slaves started starting their lives all over and all that. When they were free, they left looking for job. Some did not have homes and all that, and then they decided to make law also. Law against loitering. Like, if they see you loitering around, without loitering, it means that you're probably going to look for a job or look for a home and all that. They will arrest you again and put you back in plantation. Isn't that wickedness? Is that not wickedness? You know what? Let's get into this.
Oh my gosh, this is absolutely right. The origins of modern day policing are not in the Jim Crow era, but in slavery. I truncated the history in the other video, and I'm so glad that you commented this because it is definitely more complicated than that. And that's necessary for us to understand, because when we are wondering why Black women make up a smaller number of the population than anybody else, but make up 20% of the missing women who are not looked for at the same rate as everybody else, we have to ask ourselves, what are these police forces doing? What is law enforcement doing? Why isn't the federal agencies that work with prosecuting the people who unalive Black women in other countries, what's the deal with that? So the earliest traced patrol is in the 1700s in the Carolinas. And they had one mission, and that was to squash anybody who's enslaved trying to run or leave, or the uprisings. We don't often discuss this or hear about this in history because there's a dog. The history of uprisings is very sanitized, and kind of people even back in the day, in the 1700s to the 1800s, they were actually clearing the records of these uprisings because it looked really bad. They also didn't want other enslaved people learning about how successful or half successful these uprisings were and trying to replicate it in their own towns. So remember how yesterday I said it has to do with people's property, like the law enforcement in certain fancy areas or just anywhere, they have this idea about whose property they're protecting. That comes from the property being people. So these early slave patrols were equipped to apprehend, chase, and in some cases very violently detain runaway enslaved people so that they could return them to their owners, their enslavers. It's hard to get the old language that justified these systems out of our heads, but we are doing it one day at a time. This also ties into why pew ownership for Black people is, obviously it's something we have a legal access to now, but it is not viewed in the same way as it is for other people when certain people in law enforcement witness you with that and then decide that you are a threat. So I'm going to read you from the NAACP, the early patrollers' oath that they used to swear before they go hunt for people. I, patroller's name, do swear that I will, as a searcher for pews, swords, and other weapons among the slaves in my district, faithfully and as privately as I can, discharge the trust reposed in me as the law directs to the best of my power. So help me God. North Carolina Slave Patrol Oath. So as you can see, it's not just about, okay, we're going after Black people who broke the law. It was also a social acceptable way to monitor the movements of Black people because they were Black people, and because their free movement, their ability to arm themselves, their ability to fight back was something that was taken away from them and could not be at all given back to them. So slave patrols continued till the end of the Civil War and the passage of the 13th Amendment, but they were replaced by something else. During Reconstruction, which, as Carol Anderson, the amazing historian, notes, was not actually a successful thing that happened, and Reconstruction itself was Reconstruction, these slave patrols turned into militia-style groups of white men. And those people were tasked to make sure that the equal rights that the 13th Amendment granted them were not something that Black people could freely access. These were not one-off militias or clubs of like bigots in the town. These were people who systemically, relentlessly, and very carefully looked at every single free civil right that Black people now had and said, what are the ways we can make sure they can't use it? And if they do use it, what kind of violence should we use to make sure nobody else feels safe to do so as well? Towns, of course, come up with Black codes, and this is ways to get around the fact that they're supposed to give civil rights to these people. And they say, because you're Black, this is what you can't do, this is what you cannot do. But guess what happens? 1868, that all changes. The U.S. Constitution has the 14th Amendment. It's ratified, and it technically abolishes Black codes all over the nation. What comes up to replace it? The thing I brought up yesterday without giving you the whole rest of that context, Jim Crow laws. State law and local statutes that legalized racial segregation and these different ways that you couldn't exercise your citizenship because of who you were and what you looked like. So now what? We're in the 1900s. You've got local municipalities and different cities saying, how are we going to enforce our local laws? And also, how are we going to enforce Jim Crow laws? How are we going to make sure that the Black people do what we want them to do? Oh, police departments. The police and law enforcement agencies were depended on to enforce with violence and excessive force these new Black codes that were just Black codes under another name. So when you see an agency like this or law enforcement departments having higher rates of violence against very specific ethnicities, it's because of this history. Oh, somebody wants to play. So this is why I will continue to say when you are in certain places that have more wealth or privilege, people feel very comfortable asking you for your papers. They want to know what qualifies you to be here. Why are you near our valuable things? And we cannot be surprised when that continues to happen because the Jim Crow laws didn't technically end until the end of the 1960s. Most of our parents, or you guys who are in the community watching this, were born in those years and were raised by people who were raised in decades of Black codes or other Jim Crow laws. So this stuff doesn't just poof disappear because we say, oh, okay, technically we're not going to enforce it anymore. If you want like a one-page history on this too, just so you could have the actual numbers and stats and facts, go to the NAACP and look up the origins of policing. It doesn't matter how many times it happens. I am continually shocked at the ways other women who are seemingly girls or liberal or for women's advancement are just so triggered by Black women thriving. I think it's one thing to be accepting and not openly hostile to people who are different from you, but it's another thing to deal with the deep-seated fear that patriarchy and patriarchal cultures instill in women, which is that there's only so much protection, there's only so much privilege to go around, and you need to protect what's yours. I find too with a lot of women is that if you believe, if they've already convinced themselves that what they have, like they've convinced themselves to like what they have and not go for more, it's really disconcerting to see another woman, especially a woman who you have been taught or socialized to believe should want even less than you have, believing she's worth more or believing that she deserves and should go after what she wants. I think people look at someone like Bozoma St. John, the former CMO of Netflix, and they think she should just be happy that she was allowed to be in the building. Why does she have to be so loud? Why does she have to be so into her fashion? Why does she have to like herself so much? I think people are okay with you succeeding, but if you like yourself, then you become dangerous in a certain way because they can't use any manipulation of your supposed inferiority or your gratefulness to be there to get you to do what they want you to do or to stay smaller or to give up more to them. Anytime anybody betrays the social code or the socialization that we're taught from small is what makes society turn and makes us safe, there's this sense of fear because it's now, okay, the rules have been upended. The script that we were all going by, that I understand, that's familiar to me, it doesn't apply here. So what does this mean about everything else I believe? What does this mean about what I believe I'm worth or what I should be expecting in my own relationships or in my own life? And rather than examining that, rather than looking and interrogating their own beliefs, they would just like people to sit down and not unsettle them and their way of thinking. It's so much easier to do that.
Shout out to her. She really did an amazing job explaining this and all of that. And I want to ask this, I've really been wanting to ask this, but I don't know. I just like keeping it to myself. Why is it that, it's okay for colored kids or men to probably go around with but it is not okay when they say it on a Black man. They always feel threatened and probably start going haywire and probably end up doing something nasty to the person. So I really want to know. And on this policing, I have really on like, wide track. I have really like, I read some certain things about policing, and I think, what is that called? I think vagrant's law, and I think loitering law too, which actually they made for the free slave. It's really amazing how people are so evil. I'm so sorry to say it, but that is a reality, because like, sometimes when I go through the history and I am like, how did people do all this to a certain people and then still feel that there is no need to fix what they did and all that? I mean, that is evil, You free people from the plantation, and they are trying to look for a way to settle in or look for a way to live their lives again, trying to get a job, trying to get home and all that. And they also went around to make vagrants, how I'm pronouncing, I think vagrants law and loitering law, which also like, affected the newly freed, because they were just freed, and it affected them that in a way, like they were unemployed, they were on home, they were going around looking for job, looking for houses and all that, and they met that. And then when they see them on the way again, like, when people are going out probably looking for job, and they are like, why are you supposed to be walking around? So if you don't walk around, how are you supposed to get a job? If you don't look for home, how are you supposed to get home, right? So we do all this things to arrest them again and put them back in the plantation. Man, this is evil. It is evil. It's only an evil person that will, like, that will free you and look for a way to bring you back to your captive. Only that. So it was called slave catchers, right? And they are only there to protect the rich landowners, and not for its, they were made for themselves, not for people that look like me, because if they get you, you know what they are going to do. And then that policing also boils down to, like, some certain people, even some of them individuals, some of them do police work. Even when they see a black man in a certain area, they start asking for your ID. What are you doing here? Or do you live here? Why? Because already they are looking down on you, that you are probably not supposed to afford something like that or live in a nicer place, because to them, black people are not supposed to live in a nicer place. Black people are not supposed to have something good and the rest of it. You get? And I remember a video, a black man who actually lived in a probably predominantly white neighborhood. He went fishing, and that was how they kept policing him. Like one after the other, they are coming. Do you live here? What are you doing? Why are you fishing? And all that. And he ended up putting their faces on TikTok. Some actually lost their jobs and all that. They came back to cry wolf. You know how they do when they lose their job, white tears. They also told the man to make video and trying to debunk that it was just like, old joke. The man refused to do the video, and a lot of black people said, if you ever did that video, we're going to unfollow you. And he did not do the video because it's like giving them edge over you. Why would you even do that? So really, there are some things you see, how horrible some of them are. So like some of these laws they make and enforcement and all that were just a way they that's why today, police and all that, that's why police brutality is like a norm, because it was the button they passed on from the, that they passed on to these ones. So most times you see them all acting wild and going crazy. That's all I have to say. Let me know what you all think in the comments. See you on in my next video. Bye for now.